In 1988, then U.S. Attorney Rudy Giuliani decided to use a controversial legal shortcut known as the RICO statute to take over the entire International Brotherhood of Teamsters. The union was put under control of the Independent Review Board, the IRB, which gave a large Washington, D.C. law firm sweeping power to remove any union official for life, whether or not they were ever accused of a crime. 25 years later, 1.4 million Teamster members are still denied rights of free speech and due process. Union members across the U.S. have been expelled for simply speaking to someone who was targeted by the IRB.
If they can do this to the Teamsters Union, they can do this to any organization. If they can take away our rights, what stops them from taking away anyone's rights?
If we fight for the principle of Teamsters, we can save union takeover.
You have my full and complete support in your fight to remain a free and independent union in this democratic land.
It's time somebody challenges this. We have to do it. It's wrong.
If the United States government can move in and take over the Teamsters Union, they can move in and take over the steel workers, they can move in and take over the United Mine Workers, they can take over the First National Bank in your community, they can take over any business, any entity. It is the most oppressive type of governmental action that I can remember in my lifetime.
I think the government's lawsuit and the remedy that was negotiated was very much justified. I think it was the only potentially successful strategy for breaking the alliance between the mafia and the Teamsters Union, and so I'm very positive about what has been accomplished.
And the consent decree was very broad, and it was very aggressive, and then Edelstein interpreted it at every turn very aggressively. He interpreted, he basically ruled that all of the Bill of Rights protections didn't apply to what he was doing, and therefore he was able to get out from all of the First Amendment, freedom of speech and freedom of association concerns.
This one was just blatant government takeover by a single judge who was handpicked by Giuliani, and in order to get done whatever he wanted to get done. And that's exactly what happened. And from that day on, they just battered us and battered us and battered us. Admittedly, they got some bad guys, and that's okay. But I often wonder, with all the resources that the government had, why didn't they get those bad guys anyway?
People were frightened. They said, you know, if I open my mouth, they're going to be in my local tomorrow. And the rumors were already spreading on how they went into locals. There'd be 6 guys in trench coats, black trench coats. They'd knock on the door, they'd walk in, they'd order the officers out, ask for the keys to cars if cars were owned by the local, and you were out of a job. And that was the end of it. Maybe 60 days later, they'd have a kangaroo hearing, and it was over.
The idea was to remove the mob from the union, have democratic elections, and nobody had a problem with that. They just took it and ran with it. There's no sunset clause in the consent decree. They were going to be there for 3 years, clean it up, be gone. It's 25 years later, they're still there, and as far as I'm concerned, they're just bilking the union.
It's up well over 100 million, I think $125 million. The Teamsters basically paid for this, and so you've got this clear, I wouldn't call it a conflict of interest, but a very convenient situation where after the first 3 years, that's when they cleared most of what I think of as the riffraff out pretty effectively, and a lot more. But then they've been in existence another 2 decades because why not? It pays a nice salary, the Teamsters are paying for it, the government doesn't have to pay for it. It gives the government control over the union. A lot of people are making a lot of money off of it in the private sector. It's kind of a self-perpetuating machine.
I'm not a criminal, they rooted me out. There's no charge, there's nothing against me. They never have said that I embezzled any funds or did anything like that. They can't say that I didn't take care of my members, represent my members fairly and properly, but they got rid of me But they got rid of a lot of other people also within the Teamsters Union who I think they didn't do it fair. And the way they do it, they make their rules as they go along.
Their critics were targeted, and a lot of it was political. And I believe that when I ran for national office, they viewed me as a threat, because if I'd have made it to national office, I'd have been all over their case to get rid of them.
I was removed by the IRB, Independent Review Board for the Teamsters, for talking to my best friend, Bill Hogan.
First of all, first and foremost, from the beginning, you gotta understand why they went after me. They went after the meat closest to the bone. They went after Bill's kids, anybody who knew him, and I was with him every day.
It's hard to believe that it could happen in America, what they did, for such a minor act, and Bill never being convicted of anything, nor I, and other than for talking to each other. It's ridiculous.
Everyone who knows Bill both likes him and admires him. He's one of those people who is enormously well respected in all the circles he travels in, whether that's historically been as an ardent supporter of union rights and union members, as a willing partner with industries that needed to work effectively with unions, like the convention industry or the film industry.
Billy Hogan, he was a great guy for Chicago. Not that me and Billy always seen eye to eye on things. We argued plenty, but that's what I liked about Billy Hogan. He represented his people. He didn't take the easy way out. When I think of what they did to him, how they infringed on his First Amendment rights, it's sort of a joke, isn't it? Billy Hogan is a Teamster. That's his family. Well, here these guys tell him, well, you can't talk to your family no more. But more than that, they tell the other million or so people, oh, you can't talk to Billy Hogan no more. I don't even know what kind of First Amendment right that is.
The unbelievable fact is that Bill Hogan, a respected former union Teamster leader, faces a trial in New York and the very real possibility of going to jail for 6 months simply for speaking socially with his best friend, Bob Riley.
I'm out of my job now. I gotta hire a criminal lawyer in New York because they're gonna put me in jail for talking to my friends. So I kept negotiating down, looking for a lawyer. I finally wound up when I got a bargain at $680 an hour to represent myself to try and stay out of jail for talking to 4 friends of mine. That upset my wife because we were financially getting hammered. And at one point the law firm called her, and she's very sick, threatening, we got to get $86,000 by the end of the year. I come home, she's a wreck. She wants me to sell her car. It's disgusting what they do.
There was a legitimate basis early on for wanting to clean up the union, but it's very difficult to find any basis to continue to feel that this is an appropriate role of the government as the original body that sanctioned it, or an appropriate set of really punitive rules.
Giuliani was the one that brought the RICO charges against the International. And then Randy Mastro was his man that put the pieces together.
My reading of that is that it was anything but consent. I think they bludgeoned the board members into agreeing to the terms of it under threat of criminal action and prison and fines and everything else.
Mastro was there and said, if you guys, you don't sign it now, you'll be in court tomorrow, and we've got an equal number of mafiosi that'll be standing there alongside you. And he says, the press has been invited, and it's okay by me if you don't sign it. That was his threat, that wherever you go, we're going to put you guys and those guys, and that's the connection. But then when all of the other vice presidents signed it, and Mastro said what he said, that this could be voted out by the convention, we said, well, what the hell? We might as well sign it then. And that's why we signed it. And I've been ashamed of it to this day.
The government thinks it's okay to violate the laws if they think the end result is good. And that's not good. Because today it's this, tomorrow it could be something even greater. The Teamsters were an easy mark, believe me. there was nowhere to run to get sympathy from the street. I mean, people say, "Oh, come on, the teams, you guys are all crooks," you know. And I had to live with that most of my career.
Our Judge Edelstein had a reputation of being a pro-government judge, and he was certainly a favorable judge for the government in this case. No question about it.
The first sin in the case was how Edelstein was chosen, and he was chosen by basically violating the process or abusing the process for judge selection.
Well, everything points to the government shopping for a judge. And they shopped and they got Judge Edelstein. As far as we were concerned, it was a kangaroo court. Whatever they brought in front of him that they wanted, they got. And he was not at all a fair judge.
It's not about freedom, just the opposite. It's about control. This agreement has allowed the government to occupy our international, locals, and joint councils like a conquering army for the last 2 years. It has wiped out much of the due process protection afforded members, officers, and officials under our Constitution. While we can't tolerate organized crime controlling the Teamsters, neither can we tolerate the government controlling our union.
The motion on the floor is to reject the consent agreement. Part 1 of the proposed Constitution. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed? Ayes having so ordered.
As I understand it, the vote was overwhelmingly against the consent decree, yet it was nevertheless adopted. It's a direct violation of the democratic process. And
you know, it took everybody's focus off representing the members and put it on, how do I protect myself from this, this monster that just took over our union?
I gladly accept the nomination, honor, and pride for the office of General President, and I thank you very much.
For Ron Carey, a maverick reformer and leader of a New York local of United Parcel Service drivers, the government takeover means a chance to actually be elected President of the International Union.
When we entered with $156 million in reserves while taking in $110 million per year in dues, within less than 3 years, they had it down to zero. And they wouldn't let us see the books to see where the money went.
I knew, working on labor rackets in New York for all those years, that Local 804, Carey's local, was known to be an organized crime-dominated local, that it had been the home local of a guy named Louis Sunshine, that it was always considered a mob local. This loan sharking operation intended to get money from Teamsters pension funds to put it on the street at 5 points a week, and that the seed money for that operation came from Carey's Local 804.
He was given immunity from any prosecution, any tax prosecution, because therein lies the kickback portion of the money coming back from this.
Alphonse D'Arco, acting boss of the Lucchese crime family. And I know he told the FBI that Ron Carey was with them. He had been someone associated with the Lucchese crime family for years. He said he was with them and made money with them.
Fred Lacey did a, I don't know, 150-page whitewash of finding that everything that we had given them, all the money, all the extraordinary wealth that Carey had accrued suddenly on this $35,000 tuna fish sandwich in my pocket lifestyle,
I think the main thing is they took the guts out of the union. They have terrorized the union. The people that are in the union are fearful of the Independent Review Board. They used to represent their members, now they're afraid to do that.